The population that we support, this health program supports for its healthcare needs are almost exclusively rural people. And when I mean rural, I mean marginalized and deprived.
Just as two Indias exist everywhere, there is a set of healthcare which is available to the rich, which is completely state of the art. But at the same time, there are these people, a large majority, I would say, who have no access to appropriate healthcare. We were a group of doctors who had this similar vision that we would like to see greater equity in healthcare provision as well as in the level of health of people. Majority of poor people are not even able to access hospitals. Part of it may be because they have now been conditioned over a period of years that hospital care is going to be expensive. If you go there, you are likely to be fleeced of all the remaining resources, monetary resources that you have. It's important that the healthcare remains in the hands of the public health system, where it's equally accessible for both the poor as well as the rich, and the same quality of care can be provided. The most important thing which our work has done is to enthuse a sense of confidence in people that yes, they can access a hospital, that the amount of money that they have to spend in a hospital is not it does not necessarily have to be a huge amount, and that you can get appropriate care when it is required.
Hi everyone. I'm really humbled and proud to introduce Yogesh today. As you saw that we don't need to talk about what they have sacrificed, but he is a doctor by day and a healthcare activist by night. So he's one of the most hardworking, and all the doctors in that hospital are one of the most hardworking people and the most positive people that I've ever met. They work under such constrained environments, and yet they always have the time to pick up the phone when a patient calls. I'm sure that we don't get that kind of healthcare in our cities. He's been, in the last 7 months that we've been working with him, he's been a friend. He's also been a guiding light for all of us who've been working. We've been inspired by everything that these guys have been done. And before I introduce Yogesh, I just want to say a big thank you to the whole of ThoughtWorks, because we won't be able to do what we do without the support, without the work that all of you are doing in all of your projects day in and day out. So thank you. So we'll have a two-part session. One is we'll first have Dr. Jain speak, take us through a journey about rural healthcare and the possibilities, and a shorter part where Vivek is going to talk about a little bit about what we are doing as part of, as we said, that they are our clients, and Vivek is going to talk about that. Okay, over to you.
I'm happy to be here, and I must confess that I'm a little nervous speaking to a technical group like all of you. But now that you've asked me and you've asked for it, I'm going to share my personal journey and the journey of my organization in trying to work in this beautiful and yet unjust world. Work in healthcare in a situation where, and through this example, I would like to discuss some of the dilemmas that a technical professional faces in an unjust world like ours. And I'll try to do this as honestly as I can. Well, I'm like most of you, a very normal person, and believe me, I've grown up liking all the nice things of life, studied I was a good student along with all other colleagues of mine who decided to work together, wanted to learn, but the one specific thing was we were interested in understanding the whys and hows of ill health and not just the technical bits. And in that sense, we relocated ourselves to rural India, where most of the illnesses arise. This photograph that you've already seen includes all the other friends who have worked in this organization. But all this while working, what really affected us initially and continues to do still is the raging inequality among us as human beings, among us in cities and in villages, and the injustice that is the reason and the result of this inequality. And thus, on the assumption that if deprivation is the cause of all illnesses, then physicians become the natural attorneys of the poor. Virchow said this 150 years ago, but now it is still true, even now. And thus we relocated ourselves from Delhi and other places where we were working to the central Indian state of Chhattisgarh, which is arguably the epicenter of underdevelopment in this country. We located ourselves in a forest fringe area, 20 kilometers north of Bilaspur city in central Chhattisgarh, and we decided that we would be able to serve people of the neighboring villages as well as people who may come from to seek curative care from a larger surface area. And people came from far and wide, and this context of this place is governed by two things. One, by the inaccessibility, as was shown in the previous slide, and by hunger. Mean body weights of 41 kilos in women and median weights of 50 kilos in men means that at least 49% of people have weights lower than these. This hunger and this inaccessibility also has a pecking order, that the particularly vulnerable tribes and people of otherwise called Adivasis and the Dalits would suffer the same consequences in a larger proportion. And thus our strategy was that we would serve in the clinic and in the community, and based on what we learned from serving, we would ask questions and try to find answers, and the answers that we find, we would use this through multiplication. We would force multiply it by using training, advocacy and research as methods to serve other poor people elsewhere. About 2,500 people from 2,500 odd villages access the health services at our health center for their major illnesses, and about 175 villages people would access for our sub-centers, and in about 70 villages we have an intensive database of all their health, economic, nutrition and demographic status, where we would monitor the development over time. The clinic has an outpatients, inpatients, it has a low-cost pharmacy, a laboratory, this is a rural laboratory, but the laboratory that does all the tests and better than most city labs. From simple tests to the sophisticated microbiology cultures, with a basic practice, with a basic objective of making low-cost care available, and through despecialization and multi-specialization. The problems that we see day in and day out, including such a patient with tuberculosis who required oxygen for 3 months, or a family of 3 with tuberculosis, the father, son and the daughter, or a child with sickle cell anemia who has a painful limbs and severe anemia, or a young woman, or a middle-aged woman with rheumatic heart disease, or a woman who suffered the consequence of obstructed labor resulting in a permanent hole between her vagina and her bladder, or a person with leprosy and having a nerve abscess, or a child who sustained a burns as an infant because her elder sister, who was not treated for epilepsy, fell into the fire, died herself and caused a burn to this child, or a child with an intestinal obstruction, or a child with a spreading infection. or a child lying in the side in a mother's abdomen, mother's uterus, and requiring a surgery, otherwise the mother would also die, or 3 children at the same time having pus in their chest, all due to undernutrition. People in small places do not have small problems, was the first lesson that we learned. This is the problem that we see daily, and these problems require significant technical and social expertise. It is a myth, therefore, it was one of the first myths that was exploded for us, that people in small places, people in villages have small illnesses and you require small doctors, small labs, small technicians. And thus, even while the numbers, we could gloat over it that we've seen large number of patients, large number of surgeries, we still could not understand the amount of complexity, the dilemmas of people, and the humanity of services that it needed. Burden of illnesses that we try to document through poorly made databases suggest that problems of all types, communicable diseases and non-communicable diseases, diseases of nutrition, diseases of poor access occur in such large numbers that it boggles our mind. And even in the data this year also, it suggests problems like tuberculosis, 300, now we have crossed 400 new patients in this particular year, telling us all about what happens. Statistics, actually do not show suffering very well, but they are necessary. The tragedy is, at this moment, we do not have data in this country, what do poor people live with and what do poor people die of. We do not have such data, and this is necessary from carefully kept data to plan what should be the structure of health centers in our country, what should be this resource, what should be the training skills, what should be the skills of physicians, nurses and other health workers in areas based on what are the illnesses that this information is not available, and our academia has failed our people in this regard. So from a small center we have data to suggest that problems of all types, believe me, occur in such large numbers that it makes us completely paralyzed at times, and in fact, but at the same time energizes us to say that so much of work is still remaining. And when one talks about rural health, there's the exotic that one talks about bites due to snakes, rabid animals, and stings due to scorpions, bees and wasps that most doctors in urban India do not know how to manage it. Occupational illnesses like bad infections in the soft tissues, or nails, or illnesses due to paddy husk getting into eyes, lifestyles of poverty rather than of sedentary lifestyle leading to rheumatic heart disease, low body weight diabetes and chronic lung failures, or the tree falls, the drowning, the electrocutions and the lightning strikes, the pesticide poisoning, the burns, the foreign bodies in the ears and nose, the hypocalcemic tetany, the sickle cell anemia, the multi-organ failure and severe falciparum malaria. In fact, we feel far more challenged here working in rural India than we were at AIIMS or any other tertiary centers that we got trained in. And besides this, the mundanes, the obstructed labors, the eclampsias, the birth passage injuries, that the picture that you saw of the acute chest or the scrotum, abscesses big and small, elderly pneumonias, falciparum malaria, and more pale woman bringing up pink froth, of pervasive problem, unnecessary injections and asphyxiated newborns. So actually in rural India, we have far more complex problems due to deprivation and poor access. And thus, these are the areas where there is less human and infrastructure resources. The second lesson that we learned was that people here do not require only primary level care. They require, primary health care is defined as that health care which is necessary for all the common and important problems that poor people face, And for example, a snake bite would require often a ventilator, which is actually counted as a tertiary care in some places. But this is primary care for rural India, and so be it. So, and primary health care is not second-rate medicine for the have-nots. If my child falls sick due to pneumonia, if I am taking amoxicillin, I cannot give cotrimoxazole or something inferior to another child. That is not primary health care. That is immoral medicine. And it is not straight-jacketed protocols. If you get leprosy in USA, you get daily rifampicin, one of the most important drugs. But if you get leprosy in India, you get once a month rifampicin. Are we different animals? This is a question that we could only ask when we did a search of the literature and looked at the information. So the third message that we learned was that the battles against diseases will have to be fought in the vast expanse of rural India. And this is where the foot soldiers are absent, or they're poorly equipped with ammunition, and the communication systems and backup are poor. This is where actually the answers will come to public health for even urban India, I feel. The fourth lesson that we learned was this difference between individual health. When I go to a physician and someone looks after me, this is called as healthcare, and suddenly for the large masses that we talk about, it's called public health. Is it a different speciality? We feel that public health, this is the fourth lesson that we learned, that the yardsticks, the ethics and the goals have to be similar. As much as public is a collective of all individuals, public health is also have to have the same principles that individual health has to have. And it's a continuum. The scale may be different, but the tools may be different, but the ethics and the yardsticks have to be similar. So this is on basis of this, we feel that public health requires solutions. If you get simple solutions, it is okay. But if the ideal solution is complex, so be it. You cannot scale up by dumbing down the requirements for public health. So as part of our work, one of our to make healthcare accessible, we have insisted on making healthcare low cost and yet equally good quality, which could be done by modifying systems. So we have a single day OPD. At the end of the OPD day, the entire care has to be over, except elective surgeries. We have to reduce the cost of diagnosis. So therefore, the role of developing appropriate health-related technology came up, and to reduce the cost of drugs, that is to get generic drugs and to remove the market economy from healthcare. We have despecialized. Most of us would try to do more than one specialty, and we use like this pediatrician friend of mine who's also an anesthetist for newborns, or using bednet, these bednet for repairing hernias as one of the principles. A public health laboratory was a fifth message that we learned, that a laboratory can actually reduce the cost of healthcare, and a good public health laboratory improves healthcare of people. And we, as part of the experiment we did was, if people cannot come to the lab, can the lab go to the people? And this would, for example, so we asked this question to ourselves: is it possible that a person who's in an off-the-road village, which is at least 30% of villages in Chhattisgarh, get a report for malaria, for a blood smear, in good time? A good time is within 24 hours. The solutions which were suggested by people were that why don't we take microscopes to people? But to maintain a microscope in rural India is difficult. You require power. You require good microscopists behind the microscope. And these are not always easy, and they're certainly an expensive thing. So instead of taking Muhammad to the mountain, we said, why don't we take the mountain to Muhammad? So here we taught all our village health workers to make blood smears. So this is a village health worker who goes to a family of a patient who's running fever. She makes blood smears, wraps it in pictorial forms, and gives it to school children who are going to an on-the-road village, usually high school children. These children would take the slides which are wrapped in paper, would deliver it in a roadside shop, and buses that ply from rural India to urban India ferry these slides from different villages to our health center through these public health buses, public transport buses, where on priority in the center that we work in, slides are stained, reported by a competent person, and the reports sent back on the return journey when these buses go back from to their rural outposts. And by this time, the children would be now ready to go back to their villages with the reports, whether there is malaria or not, and certain advice that the physicians in the center may have to give to these health workers in these remote villages by the end of the day, for them to decide what treatment has to be given and what not. We have been using this practice for the last 11 years, and it's a generalizable system for the rest of the country. if technology has to be for the people, reducing cost of diagnosis and treatment is one particular area in which health technology should be focused on. More than the technique that I mentioned a while ago, there is a huge need to simplify and develop technology, as in kits, as in diagnostic tests, as in even therapeutic options in technology, if you want to make healthcare cheap, and if you want to make healthcare demystified, and if you want to make healthcare accessible to people. So this is one area of work that, besides actually peddling pills and doing surgeries, that we got involved in. For example, if we wanted to, and we asked public health questions and tried to find solutions. For example, how do I know that the water that we are drinking is potable? Is it it's an article of faith that the water that you're drinking in bottles is pure, is potable. Well, if someone wants to know in a village where there is a more chance of of fecal contamination of drinking water, we developed these tests which have a culture medium inside the bottle, which could be incubated against your body's temperature, and in 24 hours it tells you through a color indicator whether there is fecal contamination, if the water turns black, and thus this is some water that needs to be now disinfected through a cafeteria approach. And this is one approach that we have done. We have tried to develop an ultraviolet light based method of disinfecting water of fecal contamination. And thus also we have developed other technologies based on public health questions which were previously unanswered. Is it possible for a neoliterate health worker to pick up fever among all people who are sick? So we developed a low, easy to read thermometer or a BP instrument which was also color coded, or even a more sophisticated test like electrophoresis, which picks up serious hemoglobin illnesses like sickle cell anemia, based with a test that costs at least not more than 1/20th of the market rates. And even at the community level, developing an actual good first aid kit or a modular delivery kit or a breath counter to pick up pneumonia or an infantometer to measure children's length in hunger, or to even develop a newborn sleeping bag which has a heat source. Stanford University, someone has developed this for initially a cost of say $500, they have reduced it to $100. We have been able to develop this using palm oil here without electricity source for 900 rupees, which is $15 now. Or a hand wash station, which is something which is not there in rural houses, at least till people have at least 5 rooms in their houses. The next way to get down was to reduce cost of drugs. And we believe strongly that generics are the way forward, and we would like to support drug pricing, for which we also went to court. And in fact, due to this, we have been able to stall the pharmaceutical policy of 2002's price decontrolling. And this is something that we've been able to do in the organization. And because of all these, we have been able to bring down the costs of healthcare. In 2004, it was 54 rupees for OPD patient's entire care for a 1 month's illness, which was 90 rupees in 2009 by a study done. And even then we realized, while we were patting ourselves on the back, that even for the healthcare they receive at our center, which is cheaper than most places that they can think of, we end up impoverishing people still. And this brought us to this thing: without a welfare state, it is not possible to provide curative care in an unequal world like us. And this we feel is one of the strongest messages that we could say for universal health care. It is not possible for poor people to spare money for health care, even if it is extremely rational and a low cost setup that we have. We also asked other questions. How important is public transport for health? The 3 poorest states of this country, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh and Jharkhand, have disbanded their public transport service on the principle of cost effectiveness, that the returns are not so much from the transport, from the fees, from the ticket charges that they have collected. And because of this, people are not able to access healthcare. they would spend any amount of money in popularizing ambulance services which are part of public-private partnership. Actually, it's public money that is going to private organizations at 45 rupees a kilometer. But what we require is public transport. So with a situation like this, where people have to be brought across for major human illnesses to waiting jeeps, and this picture which was immortalized by 3 idiots, as if someone was having a romance on the screen by bringing up a father of a sick person. This is the reality. This is the stark reality of rural India's transport. That a sick patient is brought sandwiched between 2 healthy adults, to a hospital, which is certainly not okay. We need public transport, and thus we started running a bus also to shame the government that public transport is critically important before a person becomes supine. The brightest part of our health work has been the community program. We feel that we've been able to train village health workers who have been picked up from the community, chosen by the people, trained to a level that is beyond the very minimalistic training that usually goes on in village health workers, making them not only lackeys, not lackeys but liberators of the healthcare, and where we also decided that literacy will not be a criteria to choose them as health workers, because literacy is class related, and therefore you have to change the pedagogy of training rather than change the type of health worker that you have chosen. And health workers of these natures are able to make blood smears, as you saw a picture before of, or take blood pressures, using other technology items that we have, like this teaching stethoscope, where the trainer or the inspector holds one set of earpieces and the other is done by the trainee to train. These health workers, in the community program, we also run specific programs for hunger, for example, specifically focusing on the under 3 child, where we feel that unless or until enough food goes down the gullets of children below 3 years of age, for which at the moment there is no program in the country, we are not going to improve the nutrition status or the health status finally of the people. Going from service, the next steps of the force multiplication that we wanted to think was through training. I've never seen in our work people, the only time we see a glint in people's eyes is when they learn something new. And I think it is eminently possible, using various principles of to train health workers, not the doctors or the nurses or only the village health workers, but what we call as the middle level health workers. The middle level health workers are those who are the backbone of healthcare provision in rural India. And they include the informal quacks, call them jhola chhap, or informal practitioners, or the nurses who dot each sub-center in the country, and what we would like to call as senior health workers. And this is something that we are trying to focus on. Training people actually what do illnesses look like is eminently possible using principles of information technology, and I think there is a huge role that technology that we have learned can play. Finally, I would say that the role that we have started playing is to speak up for the health of the poor. The tragedy is that the academics or the administrators or the politicians have not taken sides for the problems of for the poor, and thus part of this we are trying to do is to unearth trivialization. What is the problem of rheumatic heart disease? About tuberculosis that the caste wise or or class wise people suffer. Problems of blood, as one of the recent articles that we wrote in. Birthing care, whether it should be an institutional care almost like only 4 walls, or should there be certain requirements there. Food and hunger and malnutrition. These are areas that requires good data to back to be able to fight any such things. To unearth trivialization is extremely important. Healthcare of rural India was always marginalized, but the recent trend in the last 5 years is that it is getting increasingly trivialized. Give them an ASHA, give them a few, give them an insurance program for a few people. This is what healthcare is getting trivialized as, and we have to fight against it on basis of good data that may come out of a good software, a good data records that we should have. And this, according to this, when we were fighting this question came up. When I gave food to the hungry, they called me a saint. When I asked why they were hungry, they called me a communist. We suffer this consequence of being called as communist. But if this was to be called a communist, I am a communist. The seventh lesson that we learned was that illnesses are biological embodiments of deprivation. I have no doubts in my mind. This is not a theoretical statement for us. A patient with tuberculosis who comes is not the TB germs that is now. It is the entire result of structural violence, to borrow a phrase from literature, but actually it is embodying deprivation that we see, and it is this, I think, which also proper data collection can allow us to learn. And thus, the eighth lesson that we have learned is that idea of a nation. We are a deeply unequal society. We have different schools for the rich and the poor, now healthcare, entertainment, transportation, amount of food that we eat, our weights are different, our shit pots are different, and our banks are different now. So actually, and along with what we learned from our friends from Andhra Pradesh, actually there's a death of the village. There is a lot, poverty of income, distance, and now of spirit also at some level. So there is actually, between these massive levels of hunger, morbidity that we talked about, premature deaths, marginalization and trivialization that I talked about, there is a normalization of hunger also. All these four phases are of people who would otherwise be called as normal, because there is so much of hunger that we see, and until we record weights of people, we cannot say that this is still hunger. And these are all people who are at higher risk of having infections than the rest of us. The tragedy with all this development is that the people who make decisions don't bear the consequences of their decisions, and the people who suffer don't have a voice. We have to give voice to the people here. So I would like to just to summarize this thing, that this journey in public health for me has been from individual to public health, from curative to preventive, from intuitive learning to evidence-based or sometimes non-intuitive paradigm, from service to training and advocacy, from doing only healthcare work to handling social determinants, from simple human technology to using information technology. I would like in my last 3 minutes to talk about actually these questions to all of you, and this is the only preaching part of it, and believe me, it's only in terms of some sharing. What are the choices between a professional like all of us in an unequal and an unjust world? We can be sometimes against if we choose to. We could be passive. We could hear things, we could take it and say, this is not something that bothers me. We could be mentally active but not physically active, and that is important to keep on forming a perspective on basis of information. Lend a voice when someone else is taking a stand, and the finally is to be active to fight against inequality. And I would here say this talisman that I would like to at least have for myself: is anything that I'm doing, is it reducing inequity in any way? Or as Gandhi said once, is it getting a smile on someone's face, on the poorest person's face that you see? I would just use the example of a doctor. A good doctor can have 3 types. As I say, a good public health doctor could be of 3 types. The type 1 doctor who hears the patient well, uses the principles of diagnosis, makes the diagnosis, heals the body and the mind. Something like a Kishore Kumar, who knows everything, who directs, sing, everything. This is a good public health doctor, and as much as the entire community is a group of different individuals, that person is doing public health. The type 2 doctor is who's also looking at determinants. Usually in our medical colleges, people who ask, if there are people with diarrhea, then is the water bad? If there are a lot of hungry people, then one's looking at, is there enough food? And then you have feeding programs, or you look at, but they're only looking at proximate causes of ill health. Something like a lot of NGOs would like to do. The third is that looking at more basic determinants. Who talks about displacement? Who talks about drug pricing? Who talks about how much investment is going into rural India? Who's talking about the consequences of people making a dam and then removing them away? That is a type 3 doctor. I may call myself a 2.5 doctor, but this is the choice that we have to do. I would even say anyone who's type 1, 2 or 3 is a choice we all can do with, and I'm sure you can draw parallels in your own technical lines. Paths have been taken differently. Norman Bethune in China, he was a Canadian doctor who went to China and helped them develop the revolution. Or Shea, or my friend Pramod Upadhyay, who develops technology development in Delhi as part of us. Or Arole, you must have heard this famous person in Jamkhed. Paul Bayandich took this route of developing open MRS. He's a pediatrician also, and or Arvind Eye Institute has been doing it. And then people lobbying at the at levels. You can choose what you want to do, service or advocacy, or Abhay and Rani Bang doing this thing. You can also decide small is beautiful, or you say no, big for impact. But you have to make some choices. The choice could be, I would say, even training. Training as a good way forward. In health, I would say middle level worker. You could choose in your own specialty, in your own technology area. I feel that our ways we have chosen is to develop middle level workers. You could be also at the policy level intervention, doing and supporting advocacy. Advocacy is otherwise a weak man's word for making an issue political. What I mean is, you should do a political action to make policies for the poor, and that is could be your way of reducing inequality. You could do research, but on the questions, by asking the right questions. The problem in research is not whether the answers were right or not. Usually the problem is asking the right questions. For example, what is the burden of illnesses that poor India suffers from? This is an unanswered question, and it's an important question. What is the healthcare package that there should be at each level of health facility? No answers available still. There are so many technical questions in tuberculosis, malaria and leprosy yet unanswered. What is the role of food in health I would say it's not necessary to answer, but still, for the doubting Thomases, it is important to answer. Why don't we have price control over essential drugs? Is another question I would like to ask research. And there are several other questions I wouldn't like to take. Developing low-cost related technology is another way of reducing inequality. And those of us with our techie brains could be getting involved in this also. Finally, as I said, I borrowed this quote from this thing. It is our choices that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. Actually, this question might come, कि ये दुनिया मिल भी जाए तो क्या है? And whether we should choose a life of struggle or sangharsh, as someone says, or calmness, just sit quietly, learn and things. I have chosen the way to do sangharsh. So one chooses to translate it for those of you who don't know Hindi. I have chosen the path of struggle, just to see that the life for people is not bathed in tears. Ladies and gentlemen, we all have to make choices, and I would suggest we should take sides with the people. Thank you.